that's everything. I think I will give it up to our guest, Rick. Rick, do you have any, were you having any videos you were going to show? I'll turn off this.
No, no, I'm just here to chat with you guys.
Okay,
no.
Fantastic. With that, I will give it up for our guest, comic artist and animator, Rick Hoberg. Take it away, Rick.
Hey, nice to see all of you. This is actually a lot of fun. I think I kind of prefer this instead of standing up in front of a crowd at my age, you know? So I think I'll do this kind of like as a chat thing because I don't really have a speech or anything I want to make. And if you're interested in anything particular, just ask questions, chime in, and we'll go from there.
Very cool.
Do you think you can mute that person?
Who is, what person?
I think Maureen's talking to somebody off stage.
Okay.
There you go. I think you got it.
All right.
Here we go.
Well, I have a question. How did you get sucked into working for Marvel, and how long were you there?
Well, actually, at the comic company, it was my first major gig after I had started doing some freelance Tarzan stuff for Russ Manning. I got noticed by Roy Thomas, and that's where I kind of started doing professional American comics. It was really fortunate because I came in at a time when there was things happening that nobody else wanted to work on, like Star Wars, for instance. And I kind of knew what that was because I was living in LA and I was following the production in the Los Angeles Times, mostly because Charles Champlin was also interested in the films that George Lucas was making like I was. And when he started this production, I was going, wow, this sounds like Flash Gordon or something to me. So I was really fascinated by it. When Roy talked Marvel into doing it, he had Chaykin on board to do the pencils and Leia Loa to do the inks on the book, but he wasn't getting enough speed out of them to get them to do covers as well, which of course had to be solicited well ahead. So I got the opportunity to do the covers for 4 out of the first 6 Star Wars books, and that basically made my career for me. I was able to, you know, launch off of that pretty well. And I also had the fun of doing some of those what if comics for him, which was great. And I'm kind of interested to see if when this next Thor film comes out that I get a little shout out at the end, because it was Don Bluth and I that created that female Thor character that has now become so popular and is going to be part of their cinematic universe now.
Oh, I had not heard that one.
Yeah, Jane Foster is returning to the franchise, and she's going to become the Mighty Thor, which will be the female Thor character.
Probably a dumb question, but
no dumb question.
Do you get like royalties if you create a character and it's used like a lot or in a movie or something like that?
Not for something like this, you wouldn't, because if you think about it, what we were doing was utilizing established characters and just reformatting them for something else. Certain characters, yes, I do believe that guys like Starlin gets a royalty for Thanos and things like that, but I get more royalties off of reprinting the reprinted comic books. I get checks every year for stuff they're reprinting pretty consistently, but not for creating the characters I created in the 90s, the Strangers, would be where I would make the most royalties. But since Marvel bought that group out and then decided to trash can them a kind word for what they did, there isn't a chance in hell we're ever going to see royalties off of that. Because part of the deal was that we got that myself and Steve Englehart got 10% of the royalties for that. I wish I got it.
Don't we all?
I guess it's built into the contracts and stuff. Right?
At that point, they didn't have contracts concerning that. You know, that came after the big what do I want to call it? The fight for talent in the media, and when DC and Marvel in particular were battling to see who they could get to come on board to work for them, and they offered them gigantic royalty situations. But since then, since the larger corporations have engulfed them, these companies have, of course, found out legal ways not to pay any more royalties than they have to, which is common. That's why you see so many people wanting to do their own books and hold on to the rights. Kirkman's a good example of that. You know, he's done well in film and so forth with his projects.
And
What was your favorite thing to work on?
Probably the Earth 2 superheroes at DC Comics. I always loved that stuff. As a kid, I was totally enraptured by those issues of Justice League that came out when I was a kid, where they reintroduced the Justice Society. And I had some inkling about them because I was reading a few fanzines here and there, but that stuff was hard to come by for a kid. And when I was like, that was like 1960, 1962, 3. And it was all by mail, and there wasn't much solicitation of that stuff. So I was familiar with certain characters like Captain America and the Golden Age Flash because of the Flash comics I'd read. But when the Justice Society was introduced, that was a world that I just became fascinated with. So getting the chance to draw All-Star Squadron and do the all-star characters and the Justice Society was just a blast for me. I had a great time. The only reason I walked away from that book was because they were going to put an inker on me that I couldn't live with, because I worked even though my stuff is simplistic, I worked pretty hard on it. And I didn't want to see this particular inker working on it. And so I just had to say, no, I got to walk away at this point. Otherwise, I would have stayed with the book much longer.
you get much choice with putting your team together, or is it pretty much the editors pretty much picking names in a hat in some cases?
Back in those days, it was you get assigned an inker, but I was pretty lucky at DC Comics. Dick Giordano was really good to me, and Roy Thomas liked me because we had a previous relationship from Marvel. So Dick would allow me to choose an inker here and there. He inked me a number of times, which was always a delight because he's just an excellent inker. And I preferred inking myself, but I just wasn't fast enough for what you had to produce at that point. It was just that in this particular case, this inker, I'm not going to name names, but he had a lot of cachet. He could pretty much do what he wanted at DC Comics. And I just wasn't going to live with this. So I just walked away with it. I knew I didn't have any say in the thing. That got me onto other books, though, that I enjoyed working on.
Are all the comics these days like done digitally? No.
I suspect so, but you're talking to a guy who isn't really in the world of comics much. I read older stuff that I enjoy, and I go back and reread stuff that I hadn't read before. Like right now, I'm catching up on a lot of Steve Canyon stuff by Kniff, and boy, that stuff's just amazingly good. That's just awesome stuff. That's just, you look back on it and you go, wow, he was actually doing stuff that was cutting edge in the military and stuff at that point. He was very clever at what he was doing.
I will definitely.
So that's the kind of stuff I'm reading more. The new stuff doesn't interest me much. I've read a few books here and there when something comes out, but their stories are so limited. It's like an issue of a comic book is like what our older comics, when I was reading comics back in the 60s and 70s, they were doing fairly complete stories in 2 or 3 issues. These people must take forever to complete a story because you're getting like a whole issue can just be 2 people having coffee, it seems to me at times. I don't see much going on in it. Very well, it can be very well written and very well drawn. I'm not faulting it for that. It's just, it doesn't keep my interest is the real point. But there is some really lovely stuff we've done. And there are artists that I've enjoyed. I can't say there's anybody in particular right now, save for, oh gosh, one of the guys that I loved was the guy who did, I'm going, sorry, and my old age is catching up with me here. It is the guy who died a few years ago who was doing he did that 50s Justice League take, very simplistic style. He came out of the Batman animated series stuff.
Darwin Cook, he's very
Darwin Cook, yeah, exactly. And I loved his detective stories that he did, adapting some of the famous detective stories. And his spirit books were just a revelation to me. I'd never read anybody who did the spirit as well as Eisner did, but he really did. He did a great job with that character. And that was hard to do because so many people have attempted that and gone nowhere with it. So there's guys like that I like. Most of the people I like draw fairly simply. I'm not really into ultra detailed artwork and things like that. I think it's kind of a distraction from storytelling. I think you need to draw well, but you don't need to just, pound detail into things. That kind of is like stops the momentum of the story for me. If you know what I'm talking about, it's just you can stop and look at a page and go, oh, that's such a great page, and you just linger on it. Well, if you do that, it's like watching a film and they come to a great frame in the film and you stop the film just to look at this beautiful frame. Well, that kills the momentum of the story. So I'm not really interested in that.
Yes, Dave.
Hey, could you tell us a little bit about just how you got started? Did you go to art school, and how did you get hooked up with Tarzan and your earliest jobs?
I was the president of a comic book club back in the 1970s, about 1972 to 74. It was in Orange County, California. Myself and a couple other guys were co-presidents. And during that time, Gene Henderson, the guy who had previously run the club, was still a member, of course. And he introduced me to Russ Manning, who was living out just outside in the canyons behind Orange County where I lived. I lived in Santa Ana and Huntington Beach at that point. And Russ Manning lived in Majeska Canyon, which was near Santiago Canyon. And so I met him at an art show that we put on at a local shopping center, a comic art show to kind of expand the audience for comics at that time and fantasy stuff. And Russ was very kind to me about my work. And just a few months later, he called me and said, look, I'm setting up a group of guys to do Tarzan comics for overseas distribution, mostly in Europe and South America, because Tarzan by that time as a comic book character had lost a lot of interest in the US. There wasn't really a lot of sales being done there. And even at that point, the comic strip was lagging a lot in its popularity. So I went down to see him with Bill Ray, the guy who's mostly a painter these days. And Bill and I were friends. And I ended up getting a job from Russ with Bill. We worked as a team. And what we did is just to keep the job, we aped Russ's style, literally, swiping panels and stuff just to make sure it was exactly what Russ wanted, because Russ was really finicky about these sorts of things. And he wanted the characters to be his. So what we were doing appeased him a lot, even though it's less artistic. But it is one way that you learn how to do stuff, how you learn how to draw and stuff. And that lasted a very short period. I'm guessing 9 months before the whole operation was shut down. It wasn't me or anybody else. It just wasn't making money for Burroughs Incorporated, and they shut it down. after Russ, Mark Evanier came in, he kept us all on for a short period until they shut the whole thing down. But that's how I got my first, my feet in the water in the business. And was at the same time, because I knew I needed to get my skills up, because I was basically like a lot of guys, just drawing stuff like I'd seen in the comics, and I only had a minimal amount of art education, and I was going to college for art, for an art degree, but it was a fine art degree. And this was a good moment for me because I realized I don't want to be a fine artist. I want to be a cartoonist. So I ended up going to my local colleges and taking drawing classes and life drawing and so forth. And that helped me get my skills up to where I could make a living and, appease guys who drew well, like Russ Manning. He drew very well. So within a short period after that, Roy Thomas had moved out from New York. He'd left New York, but Marvel wanted to hold on to him, so they let him keep his editorship. With that, he felt he needed to surround himself with some people out in California to do his work for him, as well as the people back east. But he wanted guys that he could depend on that were his guys. And I was one of the first guys he chose. So I ended up doing some small illustration work for Conan books like Savage Sword and things like that. And I think I did inked a couple issues of Cull along the way. And then the Star Wars work popped up. And after that, the What If work popped up. And that got me a firm foothold in the comics biz. But I then got an opportunity to get into animation. So I took that, knowing that was a better way to make a living, and understanding that there was a union involved there. So in the end, that worked out well for me because I'm now retired with a pension. And, that was a good way to go for me because, as you know, there's a lot of cartoonists who end up, in rough straits. I can name one right now who's just getting back on his feet, Ralph Reese. And Ralph is just a wonderful artist, but he's had a hard time because of physical ailments and stuff. And so I felt it was best to go into animation, and I had the opportunity to work with Doug Wildey, the guy who created Johnny Quest, and he was doing this Godzilla show over at Hanna-Barbera. And once I met Wildey, I knew this was just a great match for me. The guy was a real character. I've always described him as a cross between Clint Eastwood and Bugs Bunny, because he had the Bugs Bunny voice, but the look of and attitude of a Clint Eastwood type character. And he ran his own show over at Hanna-Barbera. He didn't let the big guys push him around. So he brought in Dave Stevens and myself and dozens of other cartoonists, Will Mineo, and we worked on this show with him and had a great time. And it basically established all of us in the business. So from there on out, I walked between both worlds. I did both comics and animation, depending on what the project was. I went back to, I was in animation for a while, working on things at Hanna-Barbera, and then over at, I got picked off by Ruby and Spears, two of the writers who had created Scooby-Doo at Hanna-Barbera, and they started their own studio with ABC funding them. And they picked off me and a couple other guys and paid us better money, and we went over there. And I worked on Plastic Man and Thundar the Barbarian, which was really a ton of fun. That was Kirby and Steve Gerber and a whole bunch of other people, from the comics medium that were working on that. And they were really doing a comic-oriented thing. And this was kind of what I was looking to do in the animation biz, was bring more of that kind of aesthetic to animation, because at that point the adventure cartoon was at Super Friends level, and that's never where I wanted to be. I really didn't. I worked on that show, but it really never engaged me very much. I liked a lot of what I'd grown up with. I loved Johnny Quest, and I loved a lot of those Hanna-Barbera cartoons they did during the 60s. The Mighty Mightor and the Herculoids and Shazam and all those things. That stuff, as a teenager, I was just enthralled by that stuff. I just thought, wow, this is just like reading a comic book, which was what it was, because most of it had very little animation. So it was all setups and drawings, and you needed to have solid layout people working on that stuff. And the stories were minimal, of course, but they also had great voice people working on it, which really sold it. In fact, Johnny Quest, if you go back and watch Johnny Quest, you'll see that half of what's going on there is the voice work, much like what they did when they brought the Batman, the animated series, to life. A lot of that show is sold on the voice work. Dan Reba and I have discussed this quite a bit, but yeah, without the great voice work they had, all those great actors like Adrienne Barbeau as Catwoman. I mean, that was just a brilliant piece of casting. And Mark Hamill as the Joker. All of these people sold those characters. They didn't need the animation to be great as long as they could get the acting to sell what was going on. And that actually got better animation for us then as we went along. And that's how we kind of sold X-Men over at Marvel, was doing the same thing. Although once we sold the show, after we did the show here in the US, they then took the whole show and recast everything in Canada. And I've certainly got nothing against Canadian actors, but they didn't have the cachet or quite the talent that we had here in the US, where we had these really amazing voice actors, and we had really amazing live action actors and such that were doing voice acting too at that period that had come over, because you had guys like Robin Williams and stuff going into Disney and doing voices for him, and this sold it to other actors to go over and go from live action to animation and do that sort of work. So it expanded the world quite a bit. And after I did a number of shows like Thundar, and then moved over to Marvel and helped them put together Spider-Man, His Amazing Friends, and their Hulk show and the G.I. Joe show. I then went back into comics and worked for Roy at DC for a number of years, working on Captain Carrot and All-Star Squadron and Batman, and ended up my run there in the 90s working with Mike Grell on Green Arrow, which was really a good solid run for me. I really enjoyed that because I was then forced to do a more realistic approach to comics. So I was using a lot of photo reference and going down to the underground here in Seattle and taking photographs and trying to use actual locales down there and stuff. Since the whole thing was set here in Seattle, I had the opportunity. In fact, a kind of a fun story was when we were doing that, one of the first solid stories that I had, because I was sharing the book with Dennis Cowan when I first came in. He was doing an issue, I would do an issue. And then Cowan said, no, I'm going to step away. So I took over the book. And the first thing that I did with Mike, it was a two-parter, was the finale was set in the top of the Space Needle, where terrorists were taking over the Space Needle, and Diana was caught there with a date she'd gone on, because her and Oliver were broken up at that point, and Oliver is going to go in to save her. And so I brilliantly go to the Space Needle and tell them, I'd like to take some pictures up in the restaurant if I could, because I'm doing this story about terrorists that take over the Space Needle. And literally before I knew it, the FBI was there. And I'm going, wait a minute. I've got an editor I can get on the line. And that's what I had to do. I had to get my editor on the line and have them talk to Mike Gold. And he said, yeah, this is just a comic book, guys. It's, and I'm thinking to myself, really? They think that terrorists are making their plots from comic books? That was my thinking at the time. But when I went in, I just never thought it out. But when I went over there to take the pictures, I should have just said, I'd like to take some reference pictures for a story I'm doing and not explain exactly what it was about. And in the end, they wouldn't let me up.
Oh, dear.
Really?
Yeah, no, they wouldn't let me go up at all.
Wow.
So that was after that. I spent pretty much the rest of my career in animation. I did a few comic book projects along the way because I've always loved comics. But it's a grueling business. It's just real tough, and it's 7 days a week, 10 hours a day for me. I know guys who can do it very quickly, but I'm not one of them. So, even though I have projects on my own desk that I want to do for myself, that's a different thing. I don't mind putting in the work for myself, but I just haven't got it in me anymore to do that other stuff. And even animation work has gone from the storyboard work we used to do was like panels where you would do extremes. That is, you do a setup of people walking into a scene, reacting to something and running off, or having something happen to them, and that would be 1, 2, 3 drawings for a scene. And in the days when I got into it, you could actually do shots of a group of characters running through. Shot would just be that one shot, one drawing of a group of characters, let's say the Super Friends, running through a shot, and you didn't have to animate anything else. Well, these days you have to use Storyboard Pro, and you have to complete an animatic for them. And the price of the storyboard has not gone up much in 20 years. So it's actually almost not worthwhile doing it anymore unless you are so fast at it. But again, I'm not fast at it. I'm a little bit too diligent to what I'm drawing most of the time. So I'll stop there and let other questions be asked. Nobody?
One thing, yes, Maureen?
I'm sorry, I missed the introduction. I just wanted to mention, in case you didn't, that Rick Hoberg won our Toonie Award in 2004.
Right here on my wall, right above me. Right there.
So he was honored with our Toonie Award for all his work that he's done in all his various forms of art. So congratulations again, Rick, on that.
I appreciate that very much. It's on my resume.
Oh, it is. Oh, well,
yeah,
it's nice to know it's hanging on your wall too.
Yeah, they're on there at my wall with my ink pot, so that they're right up there.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow. That's outstanding.
Yeah, I'm proud of them. Too bad.
Good for you. Thank you.
Of course.
So you mentioned Steve Canyon, right? Milt Caniff, and a friend of mine, I'm just somebody, an acquaintance with, turns out occasionally little small adventure books. I mean, very small, but kind of in your opinion, what does an adventure story take? Because I remember being so engaged by those, comic strips, 5-panel strips that were, a serial adventure. And I don't think there's much like that out there anymore. That, that's, say, the equivalent of Steve Canyon, that's going to keep you on your edge of the seat 5 days a week. And
that's a tough gig. Doing a comic strip. I did the Star Wars comic strip for a very short period, about 3 months after Russ Manning died, and that was one of the toughest jobs I ever had. Doing a comic strip is so hard because you have to you've got 3 panels to tell story, and quite often one of those panels has to be a catch-up panel at the very beginning, kind of retelling what happened at the very end of the last panel of the previous day. So you don't have a lot of space to talk in and to discuss. So the guys who do it really well, like Kniff and others, had the advantage of, to begin with, that people were paying attention every day. They were literally tuning in and reading the comics every day, and they wanted to know what was happening to Steve Canyon. So the heyday of the comic strip from, I don't know, the 1920s and 30s to the 70s, I'm guessing, maybe 80s, was, even in the 80s, the adventure strip was pretty much dead. And you'd still have the soap opera strips. One of my friends does Rex Morgan, and that's still very popular, I guess, because he gets a lot of, well, now that he's got Facebook, he gets a lot of emails and complaints about it. So I'm sure that the original creators didn't have to deal with that on a daily basis, but a lot of those are still very popular, you know. But the adventure strip is a tough one, and it's kind of dead. The soap opera is an easier thing in that it's all character oriented, where the adventure strip has to have action and pacing to go along with I mean, to sell the what I want to say, the scope of it. And things like Steve Canyon and even more, Terry and the Pirates was just freaking brilliant. That was just great. And I liked a lot of what was done by Hogarth and Foster on Tarzan the dailies. Those are really good. I still have quite a few of those. The Sundays were where they really had the place to shine, but they ended up being a separate story from what was going on in the dailies, because you weren't getting the same audience a lot of times. Pretty soon, the newspapers weren't carrying the daily, and they were just carrying the Sunday. So that had to be two separate stories.
It's a shame we've lost that.
Yeah.
Oh, it is, yeah. And they're really it's really quite an art form, you know. When they compile these things and they work so well, that's just amazing to me that you can see these things and they're not repetitive, they're not which gets boring. You don't want to bore the audience. That's you got enough problems in your life without boring the audience. And you know, I don't believe any of this Steve Canyon stuff, because I really never read Steve Canyon before. I'd read Terry and the Pirates and a number of other things, but Kniff to me was Terry and the Pirates. And I knew of Steve Canyon. It just, for some reason, I had just never looked into it. But that's kind of the fun of being a comic fan, is you come across stuff that you've really never gotten interested in before. In fact, I was kind of shocked this last week for the first time. On one of the online things, they were talking about Bazooka Joe and why he had a patch on his eye. And because in the end, it turned out he actually has 20/20 binocular vision, but that was just what the kid liked to wear, was a patch. Nonetheless, the subject of, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but the subject of Tijuana Bibles came up. And I'd heard the term before, but never looked into it. And I went online and looked them up, and I went, oh my God, this is huge pornography. And it was really amazing to me that these things were actually sold out in public too, because they're pretty pornographic. They're and they use names and characters that were copyrighted at the time. Mickey Mouse, Tarzan, Superman. They were all in there and with their logos and stuff. But again, all pornography. But I guess there was even a time when at the 1939 World's Fair, there was a vendor who was selling them out in the open, which shocked me. I just went, wow, this stuff is really, and it was terribly drawn. It wasn't professional in any way, shape, or form. It was like looking at fanzine work from the 1950s or 60s, what it was like. But
Can I make an exception to that one? The one with Mae West is adorable.
I'll look it up, because I only basically glanced through a few of them and I went, okay, I've had enough for now. And I have to say there was a Dagwood and Blondie one that was more risque.
That one is, yeah.
And that was cute. And it was well drawn, actually.
Well, one of you here will know about the collection that, was it Spiegelman put out, of all the Tijuana Bibles they got their hands on? It's a full
I know
collection.
there's books out there, and I was just looking at stuff online. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got a full collection on of those, and some, as you've said, yeah, some of them are quite crude. They involve actual actors and actresses and politicians of the time.
Yep.
But the one with Mae West, oh my gosh,
There was actually
beautiful.
one that had
It's so cute.
John McCain and another politician in it. I'm going, holy cow, these people are really
They're still
weird.
doing them?
I guess they are, since John
Yes, they're-
McCain was in one. So anyway,
You're not famous until you're in a Tijuana Bible.
no, I don't want to be that famous, Donna. Never want to be that famous.
Now you've just challenged the whole group.
I
What
know,
have you
I probably have.
done? God, what have you done?
So anyway,
Ricky?
you never know what you're going to come upon, you know, and what might, you know, might strike your interest or instruct you in some way in this business. And I know there's still a lot of stuff that I haven't read thoroughly, that I haven't thoroughly digested in comics, which is fun.
Rick,
Oh,
you
yeah.
said you worked at Hanna-Barbara. Did
Yeah.
you ever know a Tony Benedict that worked there?
Oh, Tony was great. Yeah, Tony's
Yeah,
great.
for the Jetsons?
Yeah,
Oh,
he was
good.
great. Yeah. He was an all-around talented guy. He was terrific. Yeah.
On his Facebook page, he's always drawing cartoons about the bosses and what they did, and it's
Yeah, I've
pretty
seen
funny.
his Facebook page. I think we're friends. Because I'm friends with a lot of the guys from back in the day, basically, who were there, but a lot of us aren't. As you know, on Facebook, you gather a group kind of, and they stick with you,
Right.
and you stick with them, and others chime in here and there, and so forth and so on. There's guys that I have that I talk to, like Tom Ruger's on. I talk to him quite a bit. He's the guy who created. On paper, the Animaniacs and stuff like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
One of them is a very funny guy. And there's a number of other guys like that, and ladies too,
Very cool.
at this stuff. So yeah, this is the animation business was where I met a lot of my idols from the comic book business too. Once I got working at Hanna-Barbara, guys like Russ Heath showed up there because he was looking for a way to make a living and get some of that sweet union pension and healthcare money, and Russ Heath was just one of the great characters I've ever met in my life. He was literally Mr. Playboy. I mean, he lived the life that he thought Hugh Hefner lived, only on a budget, basically. And Mike Sikowski ended up there too, and Mike had been one of my favorite artists when I was a kid because he drew Justice League of America initially. And I was just so, just excited to meet him and stuff. And he was one of the most dour characters I've ever met. I remember saying to you, "You're one of the best artists I've ever known." And he goes, "You don't know what you're talking about," But years later, Mark Evanier, because we worked at a couple of studios together, and Mike ended up working for me over at Marvel on a show called Defenders of the Earth. And at the same time, Mark Evanier was handing out work from the comic books he was working on. So he got Mike to draw a 7-page Black Hawk backup for the Black Hawk book he was doing. And he offered it to me to ink, and I picked it up immediately because I wanted to ink some Mike Sikowski. And it just was a great job to work on. I just had a blast on it. And when the pages came back, I got 3 and Mike got 4 because that was the split. The penciler got more than the inker. But while we were at work one day, Mike brings his pages over to me and he says, "Here, you ruined these pages. Why don't you take them? You keep them." And I knew it was literally, he was just being a really nice guy and honoring me, at the time. So yeah, he was a sweetheart. I liked the guy a lot. But you wouldn't know it from his personality, that's for sure. He had not one good word to say about anybody that he worked with over the years. And he worked with some great people. And Gil Kane was another one that I got to meet.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh, Gil was just really quite a character. Ask Howard Chaykin about him sometime. Howard was his assistant for years. And he was just a sharp dresser and a real, once he had done, I guess, about 10 or 15 years in the business, he suddenly had an epiphany, and he decided, I have a real opportunity to be a great artist here. So he started really studying the work, and he became really one of the best in the business. You can see it when he was doing Green Lantern, and it's good stuff, but it's rather mediocre when you look at his later material. And then he has this epiphany, and Green Lantern suddenly becomes better. But then he goes over to Marvel, and he blossoms. He started doing books like he did some Captain America books and the Hulk and stuff. And it was so much more dynamic than what he'd done over at DC Comics. And then he got Spider-Man, and that was just a match made in heaven. I mean, he's one of the top 3 guys that did Spider-Man. I put him right after Levita, Ditko's always at the top, but So it was a fun time working in that and getting to work one-on-one with these guys in studios like that. Because it's like most of us know, we all work at home. And, you know, in fact, Zoom is probably the best thing that's happened to freelance artists in our entire life, you know. The only thing that's shitty about it is that you have people now who can call you up and say, if you got those 12 pages done, show them to me.
Oh,
And if you haven't got them with you, you're done, you know, because we all used to say, oh yeah, I got everything done. It'll be there on Friday. You know, you only had 3 of 12 pages done, you know, but you can't get away with that.
well, and also when you're socializing, you have to buy your own beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
You know, exactly. Exactly. So anybody else got any other questions? I'm just kind of rambling on here.
Hey, Rick, I have a question for you about the animation. Did you guys have to work first with a budget, and how did that affect, you know, your animation turnaround time and stuff like that?
It was always under a budget, yeah, but it didn't affect us as artists. You did what you could do, and you, for me, I just always tried to do the best stuff I could do. We all had time constraints, yes, but those expanded over the years. Initially, I remember my first storyboard job was, I started out in the layout department at Hanna-Barbara working on Godzilla and Jana of the Jungle for Doug Wildey, and then Doug wanted me to do, he knew I'd been a comic book artist, so he wanted me to do some storyboard work. So he handed me, Jana of the Jungles were about 12 minutes long, I think, each episode, something like that. So each segment, he'd hand out 4 segments, they'd be 3 minutes long, but that's still a lot of work. Anyway, he was expecting you to crank those out over a weekend. And that was, these days, that would end up being 40, 50, 60 pages of storyboards. But back then it was more like 20 to 30 pages, but that's still a lot of drawing to do over a weekend.
Yeah.
And over the time, we've gotten to where we split up half-hour shows, which are 22, 23 minutes into 6.5 minutes, 7-minute sequences. And each guy takes one of those and gets, at the minimum these days, 4 weeks, but generally more like 6 weeks to finish that, because they want it so finished. This is one of the problems that was created by myself and Will Mineo and Bruce Timm and all these other guys who were doing such nice drawing and elegant work in the storyboards that it became something that the clientele wanted. So you weren't getting away with just stick figures and stuff like that anymore, which is what a lot of guys did for years. In fact, if you go back and look at the storyboard work of Michael Maltese, who also wrote a lot of the Warner Brothers cartoons back in the day, he was doing the storyboards, but they were all like stick figures and stuff and very rough figures. And that's all they needed to do, because the animators really wanted to take it from there. But in this case, we created our own monster, and they wanted to see the actual storyboard translated into layout and then animated from there. And that created its own problems. But it was something that I wanted to do because I wanted to see my own stuff on screen. It's always a delight for me to see a moment in a cartoon and I go, boy, that's a Rick Hoberg moment right there, you know? Because sometimes they were literally tracing my storyboards. They're just blowing them up and tracing them. But that created a situation that took time to work out. That is, that it took time to get the animation right from there. You look at X-Men the animated series. I'm sorry. You look at X-Men the animated series, and the animation is ragged in a lot of places. The designs are good and stuff, but the animation itself is ragged because they had so much detail they had to deal with. So go ahead.
No, I was just wondering if you knew if, like, they even do cell animation anymore on
No.
actual cell. So it's all.
Some people do it artistically. Yeah, there's artists who do it, and small houses that still want to create that way. But that's kind of a dead medium for the simple reason that, you know, the cells aren't as durable as digital medium is these days. And for instance, you know, if you've done it, I take it, you sound like you love the medium, so you know.
I just tried in school, but
Yeah,
I was
but
curious what,
having to
like,
paint back on those things is a monster.
I mean, if what replaced it? Like, was there specific programs, or do you know?
I can't
Like
give you the
software?
names of the programs, but I can tell you that going from the original back in the day, you would have animation done on, let's say back in the early days of Disney, you'd have cells that were created by actually inking onto the cells and then painting them on the back. That was changed into when copiers came around. They would put the cells through Xerox machines, copiers, and copy the cells that way, and then paint on the back of them there. But those really weren't very durable. You see some of those these days, and the black is flaking off of them, and it took a long time for them to create a good cell paint that stuck to those things. Plus, you're not always going to get what you want. It takes a really good ink and paint person to know how to paint back so that what you're painting on this side looks right on the other side, because it's not the same. You know, it's going to be, you have to layer it just right and blend it just right and such. So that went over time to a point where they were doing it digitally. That is, everything was being done digitally, and of course from there you can paint it very easily, because you can use, I'm guessing, a Photoshop style program, because I know Photoshop is used a lot in various forms of animation. I use it when I'm creating storyboards these days, because I don't like Storyboard Pro's tools. I prefer the tools available to me in Photoshop. So I know that other people use it for creating film, and they create cell animation with it. But it's just digital animation is the world we're living in now. And you know, that's just, you know, you can go back and do the other, and you know, there's guys who still do, like Miyazaki was doing it for years. I think he's gone a little more toward doing digital stuff to look like cell animation, but that's okay too, because you get a really beautiful product out of that. And isn't that what it's all about, is creating the illusion of movement? Because what most of the computers are doing is they're doing the in-between work. And that's a logical thing, where the animators are still doing a lot of the movement itself, except when you're doing rigged forms. Because I worked on Halo for a while, where we were working with rigged puppets, basically, that they use in 3D animation. And that's a place where it's all about the acting and the placement, because these guys aren't actually creating any drawings or anything like that. They're actually just taking a form and placing it. And some of them create just these rough, what you'd see, like, you know, the drawing figures that a lot of us use,
Wood ones?
Yeah, just the wooden puppet figures.
The mannequins.
The mannequins. And they literally create a figure that simple, and they animate that out, and they just expect the assistants and the other people to put the form over it, or they rig it so that the form will fit right over it, and then it becomes the animation.
Wow.
A very clever form of animation. I admire it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just another form of the art. And you can bemoan the fact that some of this is gone now, but it really isn't. There's always somebody doing it. It just may not be what's being sold to the public, because the public wants something else. You know, the public, they get fickle pretty quickly.
Can I make just a quick comment here about the studio Leica, which is all stop action, and their wonderful work.
Oh, yeah.
And then you've got people privately doing animation. And I even know someone that she's got some beautiful hand-done animation. She's even done it with embroidery.
There's so many ways to approach it.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. And Leica is one of my favorites. They just do great. Oh. Yeah, I love puppeteering. Has always been one of my favorite. When George Pal had those Puppetoon cartoons he created in the 40s and 50s.
Mhm.
I fell in love with that stuff. And once they started to do more of it here in more recent times, I went, now this is just perfect for using the computer to fill in those small movements to make it even smoother. But they're still doing it by hand. You're still doing the
Mhm.
setups and stuff by hand. So it's a real art form, you know? Computer's just a tool. Don't let it take the art away from you. Just make it your tool.
Well, I've always,
Anybody?
when we first started hearing about computers, a lot of fans and things were saying that, oh, it's going to destroy art. It's going to take it away from artists. And all the artists said was, oh boy, new toys.
Yeah, that's what I do. I'm like right now I'm illustrating a book for a guy. It's a female Sherlock Holmes thing, and he wants it done in a style similar to old, the old 1900 style cartoon illustration. And I already told him, look, I draw the way I draw, but I will approach some of this that way. And it's really fun to be able to play with techniques on the computer that I can't honestly do well on by hand. I wouldn't be able to get away with it as well. And so there's a lot of, things like cutouts and things that you can do where you can create a form and then do a cutout so that you can do a pattern within it that creates a really interesting background or something. These are the sort of things that make it really fun to play with. But most of the drawing is all hand drawing, even though it's done on my Cintiq. I'm gesturing over this way because my Cintiq's sitting right here. It's my third child.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I had a question for you.
You bet.
You're
Mike.
saying that you're doing a lot of computer drawing. What are you using for software for that?
Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Yeah, and
Photoshop.
I haven't bought any new brushes in recent times, but I got years ago, somebody passed along to me what they called the Pixar brushes, which somebody had created at Pixar, and they emulated pencil strokes, they emulated ink strokes. And so I've just adapted those over time because once you learn how to use this stuff, you go, oh, I can make a new brush out of this. This is easy. So I may buy some of those other new brushes that they're selling out there. I think there's a place called Grit or something like that sells brushes for like $20 for 200 brush stylings.
There's a lot of people out there.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I use because Photoshop just has so many tools. That's why I use it, because it has all these little tools that you can use. There's only a few things it doesn't have that I think it's Manga Studio has. They have like a great arc tool that you can find.
Yeah.
I've always been
Great
terrible
program.
with my arcs, and I hate French curves, but I use them when necessary, because I still do stuff on paper. I've got, like right here, I'm doing a reproduction of one of my Star Wars covers for somebody, so I still do ink on paper as well. I do it
Old
all when I
school.
can. Yeah, you got to do it all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Find new ways, and when you do find new things to do on the computer, it's just keeps your mind active. I can tell you that. One of the ways I approached doing these drawings for this guy was, at first I started thinking, well, what if I took some photographs and ran them through some kind of a filter or something? And then I started looking into it, and there were guys who were actually able to create patterns that made it look like the old, I don't want to say woodcuts, but the kind of engraving that you'd see on a dollar bill or something. So I was taking these photographs, and after I created the patterns and ran them through these particular, I don't want to say processes, they would come out looking like old engravings. And I thought, wow, this is a cool thing to do. And it was just fun to do. So it was just a new way to approach stuff. And we're going to use a few of them in the book, in fact.
Does anybody know if they still use clay for claymation? Or
I suspect they do. Do you know about that, Donna?
I mean, if you look at Leica's stuff, I think they use mostly the hard plastics and things, but I know there's still people out there.
Yeah.
Isn't Wallace and Gromit use clay?
Yeah, I think Wallace and Gromit still use
They use clay.
Yeah, Aardman uses a combination of clay covered with some sort of plastic
Yeah,
skin, so it doesn't have the fingerprint effect on it.
yeah. But
As
yeah,
far as,
they still do that.
as far as claymation is concerned, well, I believe Leica essentially was started out from buying that studio, and Leica uses puppets, but at the
Oh,
moment,
speaking of animation and costs, etc., has anybody ever seen that little take on the Little Red Riding Hood story, which is incredibly funny? It's called Hoodwinked.
yes.
That
You've
sounds
seen it.
familiar.
Well, the thing about it is they only had $5,000 to do it. And so they decided to make it look as Gumby as possible, to make it look like they meant to do that simple animation. And then I don't know how they did it, but they ran off and got voice actors like Patrick Warburton and Meryl Streep on the stupid thing.
And
The
Warburton's one of the
entire thing
best. Great.
cost $5,000.
That's great. That's
Isn't that
just
nuts?
art projects. Those kind of art projects are just wonderful. You know?
Well, you figure they're just, they're all creatives, and they get together and they get
Yeah.
sparked by this silly idea, because when you actually see it, they turn the Little Red Riding Hood story into this, noir crime musical kind of thing.
I think I've seen that. What's it called again? I'm going to look it up.
Hoodwinked. It's
Hoodwinked,
better than
yeah.
it should be.
It's kind of like as I said, thriller with elements of with Rashomon elements in it.
Exactly. Oh, it really does. It's you've got the story from like 4 or 5 different sides, and you can see parts of the story whipping in the background, and later on you get to see that story, so you see what's going on. So it's very much a matter of, you get to see everybody's viewpoints, and all this confusing stuff at the end all ties together, and you get to see it's okay. I would only compare one other movie for completeness of plot, and I just saw it. There's this ridiculous thing on Amazon called Get Duked, and it's about a bunch of Scottish city boys who go on this adventures trip across the Highlands. It's gorgeous, but their plot line and their coverage of what the characters are doing and why they're doing it, and the fact that they warn you something is coming and they still manage to distract you. But if you get a chance, see Get Duped, and it's
I'll see that.
The plot is,
great.
I've never seen a more closely hooked together plot. Every single thing is explained. Every single thing has a reason or a background. But there's one thing in particular, and I'm not going to give it as a spoiler, but they keep hinting to you that it's going to come, and you still get it as a shock.
Oh, that's fun.
It's so much fun. And
it's on Amazon, you said?
It's on Amazon Prime,
Amazon,
along with the rest of the stuff they're doing. But that, if you're talking about plots, the plot line of that one, it's the tightest little plot line you ever want to see.
Oh, I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, I love that.
Get on Hoodwink?
No, that's on Amazon, and it's called Get Duked.
Oh.
It's they managed to combine the country comedy with hip hop. And let me just say that this movie, I will bet, was responsible for many people going into the Highlands and eating rabbit droppings.
Oh dear.
You'll see why.
Is that like licking toads in Australia or something?
Just about.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of animation, they started out with this raw hip hop animation, and later on they do animation to show you what the world looks like when somebody's high. So you get animation. It's a blast.
That sounds like fun. I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, it's a hoot.
When you mentioned Red Riding Hood,
the kids are going on the Duke of Edinburgh adventure trip. So they run into. So this is basically, they're playing off another word. So instead of get F word, it's get duked.
I just looked it up. Apparently, it's also known as Boys in the Wood.
Boys in the Woods. That's awesome. But I think they might have had a little trouble with the copyright right there with calling it that. Boys in the Wood.
Fun.
Well, you can learn all kinds of stuff on the.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna go watch Hoodwinked. I'm sure I can find that on YouTube.
Oh, you're gonna love that. That is,
I'm
yeah,
sure I've seen it. It sounds so familiar. But I probably saw it. It's been around for a number of years, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Oh, and another series of something that looks like it's just getting funnier every time is The Croods.
Mm.
The
Has
Croods?
anybody seen The Croods?
I have not watched one of those yet.
Oh my God, they are hilarious. And they
What
really
is
do.
it?
It's called The Croods, Croods. It's about
Oh, yeah, those
caveman
guys.
family.
I've always been a fan of that particular animator, Chris. Now I'm blanking on him.
It's the guy who did the voice for
It's-
who did Stitch. He actually did the voice. You
yes,
remember Stitch's voice in
he did
Lilo and
the voice.
Stitch?
He also did that entire movie.
Yeah. Well, he did the whole movie, but he also did the voice of Stitch in Lilo and Stitch, and that's his voice.
Mhm.
That
Wow.
stupid voice that creature has, because he would call people up at the studio and annoy them with that voice when he was trying to explain projects to them.
Chris
They said,
Sanders.
you have to use the voice.
It's Chris Sanders.
Yeah.
Chris Sanders, right. But it looks like they got a third one coming out, and it's going to be even funnier.
With the-
Oh, and take a moment to Cloris Leachman, who was the old lady in there.
She was great.
She has passed on, but she was also the girlfriend in Young Frankenstein.
Frau Blucher.
Frau Blucher. Which, by the way,
we need a horse whinny off stage.
Yeah.
well, it's a brand name for a brand of German glue.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is why the horses, it's like, because they used to make.
Oh,
horses with
that's
glue.
hilarious. I never
That's
knew
the joke.
that.
It's
That's
the joke.
great.
It's the brand name.
That whole movie's just so good.
I watch too many movies.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm looking forward to one this weekend. I want to see that that new one with Frances McDormand.
Oh,
the
yeah,
Nomad.
Nomads.
Yeah. Supposedly you can get Hulu for a week free. So we're just going to take it for a week, watch that, and then turn it off again.
I've heard about it. What's the plot line on that one?
It's about our people who live out of RVs and they travel from place to place just
Right.
with other RVers. They just meet them. They don't travel together. And it's just about life in an RV at this time in our day and age.
That sounds like what you want to do.
Well, it's Francis.
They live off the land, right? No
Well,
electricity.
no, I think they actually have to stop and get jobs here and there just to keep going. But it's just, she's always so good in almost everything she does. And she's one of these people, if she picks a project, it's a pretty good project.
Ooh, part of those people are the people who do the mushroom picking up here to go out to get the
Oh, I'll bet.
thing.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I'll bet they're in there.
I'll bet there's some ex-hippies in that. Yeah.
Yeah. X is not the word. We actually do have communities of small, quiet hippies all over the Olympic Peninsula up here, all living off the grid, green.
Yeah. Bellingham?
No, Olympic Peninsula, which is over the water.
Okay.
Toward the
Well,
west.
Bellingham's well known for its hippie community.
Yeah. But this is a bunch of very quiet people that just live in their, individually out in the woods.
That's great.
Two of the people on the movie are leaders in this community, and they have major parts in the movies. And I know that one of the guys, he started living out of his car simply because he couldn't make his house rent. He still had a full-time job. And when he first moved into his car, he was very depressed about it. But the next month when he had more money, and the next month after that when he had more money. So this is a lifestyle change where people are living in cars rather than houses simply because it's more affordable.
That's what I understand about the film. Yeah, is that it's about adjusting your life to something that's more comfortable and easier to live.
Well, you also have the advantage of being able to say, I'm sick of this neighborhood. I want out of here, which most of us don't have that option, especially now.
Isn't that the truth? Luckily, I moved into a good one here. I'm pretty happy with this neighborhood.
I think most of us are, but I think the one thing that all of us are missing is Comic Cons.
Yeah.
Oh, I know they are. Everybody is. They're trying to get me to go to them, and I'm like going, I don't think so yet. I'm not ready.
Well, they've got a little bitty one up here, the Olympic Collectibles Expo, that is hoping to have one in June.
Even then,
last year I told them to keep my table money just in case, but I doubt it's going to happen. But maybe by 2026 or something.
Oh, I think we'll have. I think we'll have them by the end of the year. I think by October or stuff we'll be able to do conventions. Yeah, I don't think it'll be that bad. Yeah. And once we get everybody at least 90% vaccinated, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I'm headed toward my second one right now in a couple of weeks.
Our whole town, the whole town got vaccinated, and the fire department and hospital have organized for the second one next Friday. So
that's all you need is to get to be a part of something like that, and you'll get it done.
Get that done. Plus, everybody is now putting away the firewood, getting the food cooked, getting the house clean, because they know that for about a month they're going to feel really, really crappy.
It didn't affect me at all.
The worst.
Oh, that's nice.
No, it didn't affect me at all.
Yeah, I mean, the worst reaction I've heard about was a friend who had it, but that was mainly because she had a remaining antibodies because of a previous exposure that she had from her husband who died, and so that was the antibodies working against the vaccine and thus doing their job.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what it's there for. Yeah, it's there to set up the fight in case it comes.
So, Rick, you said you've had your first or second or both?
I've had my first. My second will be in about 2 weeks.
Okay, our second is, I'll tell you what, my second's going to be Friday. I'll let you know.
Yeah, the second one is supposedly the one where you get more reaction.
Right, that's
and
the
I
one,
had a little bit
like
of
you were
sore
saying,
arm,
once you're
but, you know,
exposed.
nothing to complain about, really.
And once you're exposed, then the second one is rough because, as Bill pointed out, it's fighting.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Dan Rather on Twitter was going, "Oh my God, I feel."
Well, like my wife keeps saying, you're going to feel that second one, but she always says that about flu shots, and I have never had a reaction to a flu shot. Just never had.
Me neither. It's always been. I got a quick question. We've been, how many people with the mask wearing and everything have noticed that there are fewer colds and flus? We haven't had one cold this winter.
Yeah, we haven't had any flus locally. I don't know anybody who's had a cold. This has definitely helped in a lot of ways, no doubt about it.
Yep.
And I've got friends that live in Southern California. I've got a friend who lives in Orange County, and he said, these people are freaking belligerent. He says, you'll go out of your house, your neighbors will all be walking around without masks, still got their damn Trump signs up and stuff. And you're like going, what are they doing? They're just making it harder on themselves and everybody else.
Eugenics is one thing, but when you impose it on yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Rick,
that stupidity won't get you.
Rick, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you have an Instagram or a Twitter account, or what's your social media presence these days?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook at Rick Hoberg. That's pretty easy to find. And Instagram, I think I'm just let me look where's my I don't know what I did with my phone here. Hold on a second. Right there. Let me look. I think Instagram's just Rick Hoberg at AOL. And because I don't get too complicated with this stuff. I'm not trying to hide from anybody. Let's see here.
We've got a lot of people.
Yeah, it should just be Rick Hoberg. Yeah. And,
Bill, I don't know if this, but before the end of the meeting, if you plan to do it, don't forget to take the screenshot.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm on Twitter at the same handle. It's just Rick Hoberg. So I'm easy to find, really. You won't go too far wrong.
I have a nerdy question.
Please.
I'll just say, when I looked at your Wikipedia page before this meeting, I was surprised how many things you contributed to that I was a fan of growing up and never knew it, because you were kind of this invisible behind the scenes guy.
Yeah.
So thank
like
you.
A lot of us are. Yeah.
And yeah, the biggest thing, of course, was Star Wars. And I was talking with a friend a couple of days ago how we would just, as kids, look at every aspect of your covers on those first Star Wars comic books.
Oh, those
And,
things, yeah.
Thank you for those.
This,
I'm
this is
curious
one of those
if,
things that I've heard from a lot of people. And when I read Ready Player One, the book, before the movie came out, it shocked me that he literally called out 3 of the shows I worked on as being the lead, you know, the guy who creates the AI in the story that becomes the thing everybody lives in, that world that everybody lives in Ready Player One. Well, the creator literally cites Thundar the Barbarian, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and I think it was G.I. Joe and his favorite cartoon shows. And I'm going, oh my God, I helped create geek culture, you know? And it's shocking to see it in a novel, you know? That they're actually talking about things that you worked on and that influence a whole world beyond that. So I've heard that from other people, and that's nice. It you know, makes me think that, gee, I guess my career was worth something.
yeah.
I've had a great time though. I really have. I've had a lovely career. I have no complaints at all.
It's cool to hear that you had a feeling Star Wars was going to be something big, because from what I've heard, like the other artists and Marvel didn't really think.
That's how I got it. Nobody wanted to do it. Deal. Yeah, and because they'd all seen these movie adaptations. Marvel started doing them during the 70s, and they were all bombs. None of them sold at all. So nobody wanted. The only one that got close was Logan's Run, and even that didn't sell real well. Yeah. But nobody wanted to do the Star Wars covers, and Roy asked me, and I immediately said yes. And I got inkers like Tom Palmer and Dave Cockrum and Frank Giacoya, and these were all people who I loved their work. And as soon as the movie came out and took off, all the big guys at Marvel stole that gig from me. It was gone. It was by the time I got finished with issue number 6, I got one more cover out of it, and that was it. Carmen Infantino came in and took the job of penciling the book, and other people came in and took the covers and stuff. And that's okay. That's just part of the gig, but it still gave me a profile to where I ended up working for Lucasfilm for years, doing style guide work for the Star Wars characters. So you'll see my stuff on T-shirts. I've seen it on dresses, on women's dresses. I've seen it on everything you can imagine. Fruit roll-ups, you name it. You know.
Was that something you were doing consistently over the years, or was there a gap?
There was a gap from about 1985 to about 1989 when they re-released the new movies, the remastered versions with new animation in them. And from there on out, I worked regularly on the movies until, what was their most recent movie? Until Solo. That was the only one I didn't contribute to. That's
a great gig.
Yeah, no kidding. But a lot of the stuff they were reusing from what we already had. You know, there was already Millennium Falcons aplenty drawn and stuff like that. And they kept me busy, you know, not all the time, but every year or so I'd get a good paying amount of drawings to do for them and new characters. And I'd get to see characters like when Darth Maul showed up and all the beautiful stuff they did for Queen Amidala, because those were gorgeous gowns and stuff to draw and stuff like that. And that was really a lot of fun. I had a good time drawing it. I always loved the characters in it.
That's fantastic.
No matter what anybody else doesn't like, I like it. And I particularly love The Mandalorian. That's just such a awesome show.
It's interesting.
I had a question for you.
Sure, Michael.
Okay, I was thinking that you would be a perfect candidate to do like a live YouTube thing, like a demonstration of your skill set. Do you ever think about doing that?
Yeah, I've thought about it, but I draw pretty slowly. I'd be pretty boring, and I'd be like watching a snail. You know, the old what is it? The old Bugs Bunny cartoon or whoever it is, where he draws a little bit, and then he erases a lot, and then he draws a little bit more, and then he erases a lot. That's kind of me. I know there's a lot of guys who just can smoothly start drawing and they keep going and it looks good, but I've thought about it. People keep trying to talk me into it, but I haven't done it.
Have you been in any documentaries at all?
I don't think so. I know that they're doing a documentary on the TV miniseries of It, the Stephen King thing, because I was the storyboard artist on that. They're doing a documentary on that, and I did a small interview with them for that. But I've done stuff for X-Men the animated series too, but no movies or anything like that. No.
Well, I so have enjoyed hearing what you have to say, and
Thank you.
you're so articulate and you have such a broad knowledge. You're like a walking encyclopedia. I wish I could open it up after this and be able to look back through it and soak up some of the information a little bit better than I have.
Well, with my memory these days, it's not as good as it was, because I'll hit points where I'm going, oh, what the hell's that guy's name? That guy was in that movie that did that thing, that sort of stuff. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Have you written a book?
Nope, never written a book. Never actually had the time. I want to at some point, but like right now, I'm just concentrating on drawing and I do a lot of commission work, and I still do a gig every month for Microsoft that pays very well, and it's what I do. I ply my trade, and that's kind of what I enjoy. But yes, I would like to write a book about storytelling or about my times in the businesses. Yeah, that would be fun. But aren't a lot of guys doing that these days? And I don't want
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. They're doing it.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody to end up doing to me what they're doing to Stan Lee right now. I just find that abominable. This new book that just came out about Stan, I'm just like going, really? Is this what we're going to do? The guy dies, and a year later, you write a book telling everybody what a crappy guy he was. I'm not really into that.
Well, what I'd like to see you do, sir, is you're very articulate. I would love to see you produce a number of videos of yourself telling your story, because you are an archive. You are a walking archive. And once you're gone, which it happens to everybody,
it's
it'll
not
be
that
lost.
far away,
Well, it's not that far away from most of us here, I think.
I might think about that. Now that's more something I could do instead of doing, a drawing presentation, just telling stories. I could do that. I could do half-hour stories, basically. That's a great idea, Michael. Maybe I'll look into doing it. I could do a YouTube channel on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've done it for other people myself, shot videos of them, so I know that it can happen for you. It's just a matter of if you want to do it sometime.
Okay.
Okay.
No, you can contact me through Facebook or whatever.
Facebook. I'm on Facebook too.
Yeah, and just we'll start talking there on Messenger or something and email.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
You're in Seattle, right?
Yeah, I'm right up here in Lake Forest Park.
Yeah, I'm down here in the Central District. Thank you. Thank you for
we're
your
not
time,
that
sir.
far
You're wonderful. I love hearing stories like this.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm glad you
Me
guys
too.
have had a good time. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to mute myself right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, let's about wrap it up. We've done an hour and a half.
Okay, no, but first, no, thank you so much,
Oh,
Rick.
of course,
This is
yeah.
awesome, and obviously we probably could have chewed your ear off for more questions for.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I just
well.
I'm getting to be one of those guys that I go to sleep about 9 o'clock at night now. So
I get it.
it's getting to the point where I just want to relax for an hour or two.
So just quickly, as Donna reminded me to make a screenshot, so if everybody would wave, and oops, and great. Anyway, thanks everyone again for attending, and thanks once again to Rick. And also, do not forget to enter your work at our Best of the Northwest thread if you have something to show it to put on the Best of the Northwest thread. And also a reminder, we also look forward to seeing everybody at our Thursday drinking draw.
Thank you, Bill, for organizing.